Hi guys, I'm taking a look at a live chess game that's going on here. Just going to talk a little bit about what I see, and maybe it'll be entertaining. So what we have here is a sort of a space advantage in the middle here for white, where a hole has been created on d4, and black has just planted the knight right there. White might consider trading it off with the dark square bishop here, with bishop takes d4, pawn takes d4, and then black has sort of a weak pawn that's difficult to support uh, via a pawn push. I mean, you play c5, but you could capture en passant here, which may or may not be good. The bishop is protecting it, but it looks like you could probably just gang up on it by piling up on the d file, uh, getting even maybe both rooks on it with castling. So white is going to protect this central sort of pawn um, blockade here by moving the bishop to f3 and the knight at c3, protecting that sort of a weak spot. There's also a little weak spot here on c4 where black can't really, I've never really seen an easy way for black to put any pressure on c4, but it is another potential weak spot. Alright, so here is this kind of double protection here. White could play the en passant capture here, d takes c6, and black would then recapture with the pawn and sort of can just reaffirm itself. Now it would have a backwards pawn on an open file here if that were to happen, and that looks like a little bit of a weakness for black. However, it would get rid of this sort of bone in the throat pawn right here. So white is elected not to do that, so that's sort of out, and this pawn center is going to be locked. So at this point, white is going to stop black from castling, or can. I assume that's why this move was made. Queen takes queen, or not. We're going to do this first. So queen takes queen, knight takes here, and then this knight is a little bit kind of weird. I'm not sure if black could play that. I mean, it seems like a little bit of a waste of tempo. It's not going to be able to come here. Yeah, see, this is what I was thinking. Now this knight seems to have just kind of wasted a move out here. Now black's going to recapture probably, uh, maybe with the e-pawn to give the black um, bishop a little bit more scope, and then the bishop can come to e5. And see, this knight now is sort of stuck. It's very stuck. In fact, I think white needs to play b3 in order to make room for the knight to come back. So a6 and b5 might cause some problems. So there it is. Now white can bring the knight back in, move it to d3, and then, you know, it seems to be maybe its best spot for a bit here. f4 maybe in the future. White would want to castle soon, probably kingside. This bishop seems a little bit funky here, not a lot to do. There might be a future on this diagonal. What would black be wanting to do here? Black needs to get the knight out so he can castle. And e7 or f6 are the two possibilities here. e7 leading pretty much nowhere. f6 at least puts pressure on e4. So what about knight f6, castles here, and then white might think about playing knight b2 to d3. And so in all that, we have this passed pawn here that's protected, which is probably a pretty nice little feature. I mean, it seems that way on the surface. Would there be any way to go on this diagonal to protect, to get that pawn advanced? I mean, if we were able to play something like bishop h6 and then sneak in d3 and d2, but there's just no future on the back rank here with two rooks connected and no support at all. I mean, you're not going to get anything else down here to protect. There was some way to sneak the bishop down there and anchor it in, that would be great. Maybe on c3. And so I don't see of a way to accomplish. I should really have that open. I don't really see of a way to accomplish in any sort of reasonable time frame getting the bishop to c3. Aside from playing d3 and bishop c3, that would be fast, but it would defeat the purpose. What about d3? No, there's just no way to do it. So it would have to be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves to get there. 1, 2, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to get there would be a little bit better, I guess. And I'm certain white could concoct some way to stop that in the meantime. So black is selected for knight h6, which I didn't look at. I only looked at e7 and f6. So black plays knight h6. And white is, this is probably smart. We've connected the rooks, and we've got the king cutting off any sorts of shenanigans here. I don't know, with the center so locked, I don't see of a way that white, well, okay. Is knight b2 to d3 supporting a possible e5 push at some point? Something to consider. If we line up the knight on d3 and maybe 1 or 2 rooks on the e-file, I don't know if we can do that faster than black can kind of respond in a similar way. I think it looks like white is kind of thinking along the same lines with a e5 push at some point. So building up here along with knight b2 to d3, and black is sort of countering. And here comes the knight into play. And black has kind of forced the issue here. So let's see what's happened with the f5 push if takes. Now, a rook swap is very likely here. Rook takes, rook takes. It seems like black can't get back on the on the file here. So that's probably not going to be what black wants to do right away. How about rook takes, and then the rook can come and reclaim the diagonal. And file, I keep calling it diagonal. Now, there's no pin here. What can black do from here? Retreat, block the file, or come to h4, which would be a waste. If white were to get rid of this pretty bad looking bishop, which, you know, if it could get to e6, if it could trade knights off and then get to e6, then that would be a pretty strong piece. Conversely, if the knight could get to e6, it would be a pretty strong piece without that knight on the board. So probably white's better plan would be, I'm thinking here, maybe bishop takes knight. Rook would probably take, and we'd have to deal with this pawn, which actually white has just done by moving the knight to d3. Looks like a solid plan. Now we have f4 as a possible move. I almost think just knight takes bishop, or yeah, bishop takes knight here, and now rook takes is probably there. And now, unless white can swing getting a pawn out of this exchange, which I don't see right away. Oh wow, that's just a kind of a nice little weakness there that black has created. Now this swap would not be something that white would want to do, I don't think, unless he can get a pawn out of it. As I said before, that would very much strengthen this center. And then white would have his own passed pawn, protected passed pawn. But still, I think f4. f4 followed by knight f. Oh no, you can't do that. If f4, then you don't have a way to get to e6, do you? Okay. I don't see another way to reroute f4 and then f4, knight f2 to h3 to g5 to e6 is bordering on silly as the amount of time it would take. However, the center would be pretty closed. Um, and then you're passing through, let's see, one square that bishop could control and prevent from getting to e6. So is there a way back around here? No. What about getting to b5, c7? Well, that's a long trip. I'm not seeing an easy way to do that. b5, a3. Boy, I still don't even see a way to do it. Okay, so I'm not seeing a way to do that, and I can see that TJ is taking his time here. He may be struggling to come up with similar ideas. It would be interesting to see if our sort of ideas are matching at this point. So he's gone with the f4 move, which is going to push the bishop away. So let's just go, hypothetically, bishop somewhere back here. Obviously he's going to do that, most likely. Rook takes, rook here. Probably rook takes, king takes. And then we just have a knight versus bishop in a pretty closed board. The knight, or the bishop, could be restricted pretty easily with g3. And the bishop, I'm sorry, the knight might be able to work his way around to e6. But we do have very solid structure on the board for white and a very weak structure on the board for black in a single minor piece knight versus bishop endgame. Is that enough to win? To me, it seems like it. Just as a first glance, I would say yes. So whether that's true or not, who knows? We can watch and find out. So to me, knight f2. If we go knight f2, then even bishop h4 doesn't work. We just play g3, and he has to play back here, so that's just killing a tempo for black. So knight f2, and then we might have the rook swap, and then rook on e1, and his rook would be on f8. Just don't see that making a whole lot of difference. The rook swaps. I mean, should we look at something like rook e6? That doesn't seem. It doesn't seem like that's going to do anything. Swaps, and then we have a weak rook on e6 so we can get behind with rook e1. But there's no way to further protect it, is there? So TJ's elected to try to double. He's going to go rook he1. If he takes, then we just move the king here, and the king's a little bit better. He's going to try to get the king into the action for this e-file as well. So the action, instead of focusing on getting the knight to e6, is going to go on getting the rooks to the e-file and dominating that file first. So if rook e1 now, he1, rook takes, rook over. See, I just don't think either side can really dominate the e-file, which is why I think it's just sort of a sideshow. To me, the main thing is to make sure the other person doesn't take over the e-file, which I think they're both doing. But once that's over, I think we're going to have this knight hopping around, and the bishop. Does the bishop have any future on the queen side over here? Say we get all this ironed out. Then we've got bishop to d1, d8, and over to a5. And then, yes, the bishop has some sort of stuff it can do over here, but it would have to work its way to maybe g1 to do any real damage to maybe the pawn structure here. And doing that would allow the knight to work its way around to e6 or to g5. Which, truthfully, without rooks on the board, may not be all that exciting of a prize at the end here. Alright, so here go the rooks. So we might be doing something like rook e1, rook take... Oh. Now why would this happen? Rook f3 to g3? I don't see the reason for that. So I'm thinking about why that move was made. I don't see the purpose. There might be, black might have rook e3 here, which doesn't seem to do much. There's no real pivot point once you get to e3. So it just kind of feels invasive. It keeps white off the third rank. Okay, so maybe the focus here is the h-pawn. Rook f3. You see, here's rook e3. Trying to keep white off of the third rank, away from rook h3, which would put a little pressure on the h-pawn, but it seems like just moving the king over would sort of shore that up. Alright, so now we have some play on the queen side. And we'll just kind of have to see how this plays out. White's played b4. Black has a choice here to... if black doesn't take here, white would either take on c5, which seems to improve black's structure and weaken white's structure, or push to b5, or you could leave it alone, but... Oh, no, it doesn't. Yeah, if you take on c5, the knight is also attacking c5, so that would just win a pawn. So black chooses to counterattack. So let's look at c takes b5. Or we can look at defending c4, apparently, with the rook. So that's going to isolate the d pawn, and black will have an isolated a pawn. So rook takes, I assume. Now we have this tension on the c5 pawn and the b4 pawn. I haven't been using my mouse to kind of point around. Maybe I should do that more. Alright, so if takes, then black's pawn structure is pretty shattered. Will be all isolated in double pawns. If white's pawns would be much better off. Obviously, if white takes on c5, the pawn structure is better for black and worse for white, maybe? This is a little strange. Okay, we have two isolated pawns here, three isolated pawns here, and then these are not isolated. Oh, did we just win a pawn? No, we didn't. Oh, yes, we did. We won a pawn. Okay, so white has won the pawn, and I was busy talking without even realizing that happened. Yeah, I need to pay attention because I'm missing all sorts of things here. I was worrying about counting isolated pawns and stuff, and I'm missing kind of what's happening. So we've kind of swapped pawns out here, and at the end of all this, well, this feels like we're blitzing around here. So takes, and then we have just a plain old bishop versus knight endgame, and pawns are all over the board. So theoretically, that should favor black. But white's structure is slightly better. We have two pawn islands versus 4 pawn islands. So probably it would give a little bit of an edge to white, because I think bishop versus knight difference isn't that huge. Most of the pawns are on one side of the board. Getting over there to that queen side, a pawn might be a little difficult. Okay, so is yeah, black might if black were to play rook h1 here, then white would have knight f3, which white just goes ahead and plays. I didn't realize whose turn it was. So we're attacking the d4 pawn, and then black comes in with check to probably play bishop c3 here, and that's going to cut off a lot for white. White will still have the e file. So I expect bishop c3 here, unless there's something better that I don't see. Otherwise, black is going to lose the d pawn. And I don't see a whole lot of reason why black would just let that happen. Maybe he's looking at rook d1. Yeah, he is looking at rook d1. Okay. So I see things, just I see them a little bit slower than a lot of people. Wow. Did that really just happen? Okay. So to a quick review of what just happened. Black hung his rook by playing rook g1. Now, he might have been trying to play rook h1 and it was a mouse slip, which is unfortunate. But either way, it's unfortunate. Even just hanging it, trying to go for the g-pawn. So what would have happened here? I mean, what was the goal? Say white needed to guard it with king f2. And then maybe he was looking at rook e1, but that's also protected by the knight. So it just appears that maybe he overlooked the knight sitting there. Either that or it was a mouse slip going for h1. Okay, well, I enjoyed talking about that. It was kind of fun to do that for once. I've seen some videos where people will kibitz other games, and it seems to be fun to do. A little bit less pressure since I'm not playing, and um, I learned some things, or at least I feel like I learned some things doing that, and maybe some others did too. So I enjoyed it, and I hope to see you guys again next time.